So a colleague recently told me, hey, my research shows violence reduces political participation. And I thought, wow, that is really a nice piece of research. That's a great finding. And then I thought a bit more careful about what he said. And I said, well, wait a minute. What does he mean by violence? It's not obvious to me. Does he mean robbery or warfare? Is he talking about youth violence or accidents? I really don't know. And what is this political participation? What does that actually mean? Are we talking about voting, protesting, emailing candidates, or elected officials? It's not obvious. So then I thought, well, it's interesting this, because a lot of the times we use these concepts like violence and governance, livelihoods and youth and gender and community. It's not obvious empirically what we're referring to and what kind of idea or definition we have of them. And we really need to do a better job in general at defining what we mean by these things. So then I thought, well, let's go through an example here and see what actually is a concept and how we can come up with something more precise. So taking violence that my friend was talking about, let's look at three parts of a concept. So we start off with us, the researcher on the left-hand side, and we're looking out into the world. And you could be looking at a data set or doing field work and physically seeing things. In this case, we're looking at the world and we see Muhammad Ali knocking somebody in the chin in the middle of a boxing bout. And then we also see below him a model who's smiling, but she just tripped on the catwalk and is in a great deal of pain because she probably twisted her ankle. So we have an empirical referent. And then the first step is to give it a label and say, well, okay, the first one is violence, with Ali hitting the guy, and the model tripping is not violence. Now the question is, how do you explain to somebody else why one is violence and why the other is not violence? What is it that's happening empirically that makes something violence? And in this case, we have three basic characteristics that help separate the two photos. One is, the first feature is violence is an act of physical aggression. Yeah? So in the case of the model tripping, there's no physical aggression, it's an accident. Secondly, it involves two or more people. So Ali is in the ring with somebody else, and he's clearly punching somebody else, so there's two people involved. And thirdly, violence is meant to cause injury. So an accident like tripping on the catwalk can't be violence because there was no intention involved. In the case of the boxing, Ali wants to win the fight. So he's going to pummel this guy and engage in some kind of violence. Okay, so there's the referent that we see, there's the label or the term that we apply to it, and then there's a definition, which in this case, it has three dimensions to it. Now, we could define violence in lots and lots of different ways. And to give you a sense of how complicated defining a simple concept can be, let's have a look at why donkeys are not a car. Now this seems, stunningly obvious, and we have a strong intuitive sense of what a car is when we see one on the street. It's pretty clear. But if you tell a friend what exactly is a car, what makes a car, you'd be surprised how hard it is to define it. So let's take the first step. First step is car must have an engine. Yeah, that's intuitive. And a donkey clearly has a heart. So without doubt, a donkey is not a car. But then we look at this boat. And the boat is a mega ship and it has a huge engine. So by our first definition, this ship would be more of a car than the little vehicle that we saw before. But that's not right. So then we go to a second definition. And we add a second attribute. It's got to have an engine, but it also needs four wheels. So the Mini Cooper on the left here, the classic English car, is got an engine and it's got four wheels. The guy with the beard holding his rickshaw with three wheels and no engine obviously doesn't qualify. There's a lot of confusion about concepts and types. So here we have a family car, which is a type of car, an SUV, which is a type of car, and this little weird contraption in the bottom right, which has wheels and an engine. So like the other two, it's also a car. Each one has the same three attributes, the same two attributes, but they're just different versions of the same thing. Now, in contrast to that, Prince Boateng, the great footballer from Ghana, has a heart and he's got legs. So there's no doubt that he's not a car. That raises the more complicated question. This lady is wearing a baseball cap and she's sitting on a tractor, and she's engaged in plowing up the fields. And the question is, well, how do we know that this tractor is not a car? It's got an engine, it's got four wheels, so by our initial definition, this should be considered a car. But really, we know it's not. We want something more accurate, and our third conception of a car could include it's got to have an engine, it's got to have four wheels, and the purpose is transport of people. So in the case of the tractor, it's meant for agricultural work, so it can't possibly be a car. In the case of the guy on the left with the baseball cap, he's sitting in a vehicle that's transporting him. It's got an engine, it's got four wheels. Clearly, it's a car and different from a tractor. So here we have three basic characteristics that help us when we do empirical research and when we communicate with other people about our research, helps define and clarify what it is exactly that we're talking about when we use the label a car. And this is why when we see a donkey or a ship or Prince Boateng or even a tractor, we're not talking about a car. But when we see this happily married couple with a parasol driving off into their honeymoon in a vehicle, we know that that vehicle really is indeed a car.